Okay, we're recording.
All right, well, welcome everybody. It is so nice to see so many of you here today and to be able to share a little bit of Torah on an interesting topic. Thank you so much to the Jewish Federation of Orange County for inviting me to be a part of this. And I want to first say that it's a lot of chutzpah to be a man and be talking about women in the Bible to so many women. So, if I'm wrong about something, please, you can correct me or anytime, ask any questions whatsoever. And I bow my head in humility that I haven't shared the same experience you have as being a woman. So I look forward to hearing your illuminating thoughts. It's been too long that men have been teaching women Torah, and I think we have to spend a lot more time as men listening to women teach Torah to be able to deal with 2,000, 3,000 years of history and Torah that has been forgotten, unfortunately. So we have a lot of work to do, I guess. But it's so nice to be able to be here and be able to share some Torah with you. I wanted to pick a woman from the Torah, from the Bible, that maybe you haven't heard of before or haven't heard the story in particular. And sometimes that's the most interesting parts, to learn about areas of the Tanakh you have never even seen before or heard before, or maybe for a second you've heard it or seen it, but not really. So it is in this portion is in a Haftorah. It's the Haftorah Parshat Vayera, where Abraham welcomes in the guests and the angels. Parshat Vayera, the third parsha of the book of Genesis. But this is the story of the Shunammite woman. Now, I want to first ask, do you guys know, if I asked you, have you ever heard, do you think there is a story about, is there resurrection in the Jewish Bible or the Old Testament, right? Yes? Can anyone give me an example of resurrection? Sounds sort of Christian, right? I know that's big in their world, right? Sue?
It does indeed sound Christological, not Jewish. However, didn't both Elijah and Elisha resurrect people? Elijah laid down over someone and breathed life back into him, and Elisha, the Shunammite woman's son.
Great. So yes, 100%. You've been coming to synagogue. Good. Wonderful. Listening to the Haftorahs. Very good. So yes, this is one of the few examples. Really, Elijah and Elisha are some of the few examples in the Jewish Bible that there is incidents of resurrection. And Elijah was a great prophet. Of course, we usually bring him up over Passover, but he was a great prophet, really responsible, instead of like the literary prophets, which come a little bit later in the Tanakh, which are more about their speeches and everything like that. The prophets Elijah and Elisha, who was Elijah's disciple, their specialty is doing miracle work, which we see all throughout those sections of First and Second. First Kings is a lot about Elijah, while Second Kings is more about Elisha. Now, Elijah and Elisha came really at a period of great turmoil. Elijah being at the period of Achav and Jezebel, where there was a very great movie made about them, of the lovely Jezebel, who is the sort of temptress and tempted Achav into doing idol worship. But even the kings after Ahab and Jezebel were not great either. And it was during these times that Elijah and Elisha really fought back and really tried to restore faith at a time when the people's leaders were not restoring faith in God, right? They were actually doing the opposite. They were building temples to idolatry. So that's kind of the setting. I wanted to just give us a brief setting right now. We're in Eretz Yisrael. We're in the land of Israel. At this time, it's broken up into two kingdoms. There's the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judea. And we find ourselves in a small town of Shunem. a small town of Shunem. And I'm going to tell the story because unlike maybe some of the other stories, you might have not heard this one before. So I'm going to tell it relatively quickly, and then we'll get into some thought about this particular story. So there's a nameless woman named only by the Torah, the Shunammite woman, as in the woman from Shunem. She's never named, so we just call her the Shunammite woman. As does happen from time to time, there are many famous women in the Tanakh who are never named. Shimshon's mother, also another mother who's never named in the Torah. So there's a lot of mothers who are really righteous women who are never named, which again goes back to the starting concept that we really need to bring women back into the tradition and start naming them. But regardless, this is what we have to work with. So there's this Shunammite woman, and she's living in Shunem, as we say. And Elisha is touring the countryside. He's just beginning to discover his prophetic powers. He's sort of at the beginning of his prophecy, doing miracle work, and he's not really known yet. And he's moving around, and he's doing different works of miracles at different people's places. And he stops by Shunem. Nobody really knows who he is. But this woman kind of steps aside and sees that there's something really unique, that there's something really different about this person walking through. Now, one thing to know is that Elijah, if you saw him, you would probably be pretty scared of him. He supposedly walked around with animal furs and animal skins. And he was a very scary individual. He was a rough around the edges. And I'm guessing so was Elisha, because Elisha was his disciple as well. So I don't think Elisha would necessarily be a person you'd walk up to and be like, wow, this person, I want to talk to this guy. But although that's the case, the Shunammite woman recognized something special about this person and brought him into her house and gave him a place to stay. And it said, if you're an itinerant person, you're walking through the area often, every time you come to Shunem, you're going to have a place to stay in my house, and gives him a place to stay and food to eat. And that's great. And so he does that. And one day later on, because of that, Elisha actually blesses her with a son, as happens many times in the Torah, right? We do good actions, we have children. I don't know if I agree with the theological sentiment, but regardless, we see it happening often in the Tanakh. So she's given the children by miracle work of Elisha, but the only problem is what all of a sudden we see that the child grows sick. The Torah actually says, the Tanakh says he has a pain in his head or something like that, and he comes down with a lethal illness. And it's funny, her husband says to her, there's nothing we can do. What are we going to do? He's dying. There's nothing we can do. And she says, no, I know somebody. And she calls up Elisha. She finds Elisha, right? She calls him on his cell phone, and Elisha comes over and actually heals him. He first sends his staff, and then he sends himself and heals the boy. And we actually know that the boy was actually dead. He finds him dead, and that Elisha actually, in a miraculous way, resurrects the boy. Now, it would be wonderful. We can certainly teach a class about resurrection, and I'm not necessarily doing a hands-on demonstration this time, but if you want to come back for other classes, we could do that. But I really want to concentrate, especially because there's been enough classes that concentrate on the men of the Bible, and here we're concentrating on the women of the Bible. And so I really want to concentrate on the Shunammite woman. And what did she do to sort of deserve this miracle? And what was special, not about Elisha, but what was special and about the recognition of the Shunammite woman? Okay, so I'm going to put up the text now. This, again, the story comes, just in case you want to reference it, comes from the 4th chapter of the 2nd book of Kings, verse 8. So this is the story. I'm not going to read through all of it, right? You see, it's a little bit long and would take time to read through. But we're going to just look through a couple of passages on how the rabbis, the sages, look at her. So I want to first bring our attention to Brachot. Brachot 10b22. Brachot, this is a section of the Talmud usually on blessings. And the general heading where this teaching comes from is that Sadiq Tatzil Memavet, right? That tzedakah saves us from death, in which the Gemara brings this story as a source. that this woman did tzedakah, she did an act of charity, and for that reason, she was able to have this great miracle happen. So Brachot says here, and I'm going to read just for, if we had more time than a half hour, I would have everyone read a source here, but I'm just, for the sake of time, I'm going to go through here. So regarding the woman from Shunem, and she said to her husband, behold, now I perceive that he is a holy man of God who passes by us continually, right? This is the verse in 2 Kings where the woman says to her husband, I know you don't recognize this, but this person is actually really special, right? I perceive that he is a holy man. So the obvious question that comes up is, well, it seems like the woman recognized something that the husband didn't recognize. And this kind of grits at the rabbis a little bit. Why might it insult the rabbis a little bit? Anyone?
They're all men.
They're all men, right? They don't want to be bested by a woman here. So they said here, what's going on here? So Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, said, from here, where the woman from Shunem perceived the prophet's greatness before her husband did, we derive that a woman recognizes the character of her guests more than a man does. Okay? What do you guys think of this teaching? Women recognize the character of their guests, their house guests, more than a man does.
Two things. One, that the women are typically the ones responsible for hosting and entertaining, so they're going to be more plugged in. And two, women's intuition strikes again.
Right. Women's intuition strikes again, and they're more responsible for hosting all the time. But I'm going to say this, like, I actually, if I'm the one preparing the house and like getting everything ready, like in my house, a lot of time I'm cooking for Shabbat dinner. It's actually sometimes harder to pay attention to the guests because you're busy like serving food. You would think maybe the husband's sitting at the table, he's getting served because he's the man, right? You think it would actually be maybe the husband who would be more insightful, right? But it's actually not. It's actually the woman here. And right, just as you said, there's sort of a Talmudic proof for like a woman's intuition, per se. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that this is Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
I think women are very more intuitive when it comes to people because they're children or family members. You look at body language. How do they feel? What's going on with them? Are they emotionally upset or whatever? And women look for these things in not only their family, but anybody who comes into the house. So I think she was able to read better, the rabbi better than some of the men are who are looking at for different things in the guest.
Beautiful. And I want to really jump from this because I think this is important. One of the things that's really important about learning Torah, or about women, for me at least, and I'm just speaking from my own opinion, is a lot of the times we only keep it in the realm of men. We only keep it in the realm of women, right? Well, women are good at this. Women are good at being empathizing with people who come around them, and it's almost like we'll leave that to the women, right? But no, men need to learn from women, right? When men actually need to change themselves and become, and just as women have learned from men for so many years, so too men need to learn from women. By the way, great example of this, Hannah, we usually read this Haftorah on Rosh Hashanah, day number 1, right? Is Hannah, the way she prays when she prays for her son is actually the way the rabbis model how a Jew should pray, right? Not just a Jewish woman, but both a Jewish woman and a man, right? So I want to try to take this particular teaching and say, maybe that's something that we should all strive to, right? Maybe that's something we should learn, that characteristic, and try to gain that, right? And try to understand that more deeply. Now, there might be a caveat here, right? We'd love to think this, but there might be a caveat. Like if Elisha was a prophet and he becomes a very famous prophet, he's in the Bible, of course, right? He's very, very famous. Then maybe the woman's like, well, I want to have a place for this famous person, right? I want to put a place for this famous person. Okay. So let's look what Ralbag has to say. I think he's going to help us out with this. Ralbag, was his name was, we sometimes in Latin call him Gersonides. And he was a commentator and a philosopher from the 16th century. Great commentator and philosopher. So he said on this verse, he said she urged him to have a meeting. So this is on that verse. She was thoughtful because she worked very diligently with all of her strength to make sure she had food in her house to feed him. She was thoughtful, especially because Elisha's, I'm sorry, that's my typo here. I translated that this morning, because Elisha was not famous yet, but it was just her way to make sure that there was food in the house to provide guides in the city. Sorry, this translation needs a little bit more editing for me. But we get the general picture, right? What were the two things? What did we gain from this commentary? Number one, right? Was Ralbag famous? Was she famous yet? Was Elisha famous yet? No. Right? Elisha wasn't some famous person. He was just some honestly dirty guy in the street, right? That's the way Elijah looked, right? He had skins on him and he was living on the road and everything like this. And she went out and took care of him. And I also think this mitzvah is very important, that it was just very much her practice to keep food in the house, to feed those who came by. That was what she did. She was always prepared to do acts of loving kindness. I think that's really important for us because, a lot of us say we'll do acts of loving kindness when the opportunity comes, but how often do we actually prepare to do loving kindness, right? Prepare for those opportunities to come,
Could I just say something about this? That I think there's a special relationship between some of these women and prophets, because historically, barren women did not get the sympathy from their husbands that they did from the prophets who did sympathize with them. And then amazingly or not, as soon as the prophets left, the women got pregnant. So I think that, just saying that, I think there's a special relationship between women and these prophets who
Beautiful.
who felt for them more than their husbands did when
Right.
they were barren.
The function of a lot of Jewish leaders is to look for people on the sidelines, people who have been sidelined from society for whatever reason. And we're gonna get, that's a great comment, because we're gonna get a little bit more into that in a second. Any other comments before we keep moving here?
I was going to suggest,
Yes.
to my esteemed colleague, who I'm going to miss tremendously because he teaches wonderfully, but that we're taught also in Mishnah to repent one day before our death. And of course, the rabbis say, we don't know when it'll be. And the answer, of course, is therefore repent every day. That the one who does hachana, is prepared, is esteemed, and then we should try to prepare for and know. The wise one knows that which is coming before they do their act as well. And perhaps a woman, men live in a temporal universe, women live in a different universe that we have to learn how to live in, which is the one which doesn't live perhaps by the structure of immediacy of time, but I'm reading into this that perhaps there's a sense that we can learn here regarding how not to live in this moment, but how to live in a more broader horizon that may be intuitive in a woman's thinking that we don't benefit from.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Cohen. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that comment. And I think we're really getting into really connecting to what Rav Kook is about to say. Has anyone ever learned Rabbi Kook here before? I see Rabbi Cohen nodding. Anybody who's not a rabbi here? So not many. Rabbi Kook is someone who we should definitely learn. Rabbi Kook was the first rabbi of Mandate Palestine. You can see by his dates that he died before the creation of the state of Israel. So it was called Palestine back then. I'm not taking a political position, but that's when he was a rabbi there. And he was really an unbelievable rabbi because he actually studied modern philosophy. He came from both a Hasidic and a mitnagdik. He came from a mystical family and a more Talmudically based family. His mother was from a Chabad family, and his father was from a Lithuanian Talmudic family. So he kind of came from all the different backgrounds in Eastern Europe, but he also loved secular scholarship. So he also studied Western philosophy. He had learned Heidegger and Hegel and all these great people. So he's really fantastic. And he came to Israel. He's also a fantastic Zionist. He really believed in the state of Israel as a religious person, and sort of has framed what religious created, sort of the theology of religious Zionism, crafted it in this beautiful way. And he wrote a terrific commentary on the two tractates of the Talmud, at least the stories in it, called Ein Ayah, which is the wellspring of seeing. Very, very fantastic stuff. Unfortunately, it's never been translated into English yet. Maybe one day if I get around to it, but this is just a little piece of it on that same sugya, on that same discussion, on that same brachot from above. Now, I'm going to warn you up front. This text is sexist, okay? It is sexist, right? I just want to put that on the table. No one's saying it's not. It is sexist, and I could point to millions of texts that are sexist in Judaism, and really there's no excuse for it, right? You can put it into historical context. Fine, I understand that, but we have to therefore interpret it to try to pull out the pearls of wisdom, to try to pull out the diamonds within it, and not sort of get caught just in the fact that it's sexist, because then we'll just, write it off as not important. But we're actually going to try to plumb it for its spiritual meaning. Okay, so I'm going to that's my trigger warning for everybody, is that this is a sexist text. Okay, but I think it actually has something to teach us besides its sexism, of course. So this is what he writes on this little piece of Talmud. He says, this is similar to what is said by our sages of blessed memory in a different place in the Talmud, in Tractate Nida, the tractate actually on dealing with menstruation. God gave a woman an extra bit of understanding, more than men. Okay, so we actually see now there's two sources for the Talmud saying that women have an extra understanding, sort of a sense that's different than men. And so he's going to explain this little passage. He says, meaning that there is natural recognition and understanding similar to one of the five senses. And then there is knowledge that can be gained by learning and experience. So Rav Kook first delineates that there are two different types of understanding. There's natural recognition that we sort of have inborn within us, right? Sort of like our senses. And then we have learning and actually knowledge we gain by experience and learning, right? Either by reading a book or having certain life experiences, right? I'm actually able to gain knowledge that way. So he says, it is the natural way that one who tends to be busy with intensive intellectual learning, their natural abilities of sense become weakened or clouded. Therefore, a woman who is not as good at learning intellectually has extra intelligence when it comes to natural understanding and inner recognition more than a man. Okay? Sexist text. I warned everybody. Very sexist text. Definitely do not believe that women have any less of ability to learn. Okay, put it out there right there. Right. That being said, I think what Rav Kook is saying about human beings is very interesting. When a human being tends to be very busy with intellectual matters, with sort of even the right thing, right? Doing Torah, doing what's asked of us, kind of following that straight path, sometimes you get distracted from what's actually happening around you from other people. Has anybody met like a PhD scholar who's like the top of their field, but then you try to talk to them and it's like they don't even like see what's around them, right? I think that's a little bit of what's being said here, right? And our tradition harps so much on Torah learning that we need to be intellectual, we need to learn, we need to constantly be focused in learning. And here Ein Ayah is talking and saying, there's something really great about the sense that women have because they're not learning, right? Because they have this natural, therefore, ability to actually connect to the people around them.
Oh, Rabbi,
Yeah.
speak of, there's a prayer that men say every day about thank God they're not a woman. So how does that fit into this thing about well, I guess male superiority. I'm not saying about all men, but it's just when I learned about that prayer, I said, "Gee, that is strange."
Yeah, that prayer definitely exists, and thank God it doesn't exist it's not in the conservative Siddur or the Reform Siddur. And yes, it's a sexist prayer. I could tell you theologically why it's in there, but it's a sexist prayer. I don't know what to tell you.
You could tell me. Oh, that's why I'm curious. Even though it's not within
the reason, the specific reason it's in there, because the rabbis felt that there was some meritorious there was merit to being obligated to more mitzvot. Since women are obligated to less mitzvot, therefore it's not as good to be a woman, right? That's the technical reason it's in there. But again, it's a sexist blessing that we should not say. Okay. I just want to I see Jill's raising her hand.
Yeah, so I have to say I'm not reading this as particularly sexist. I'm just reading this as, okay, there's that basically God gave women, and he said, an extra bit of understanding. So there's this understanding that you talked about, intensive intellectual understanding, and then there's this kind of innate, understanding that just, without having to have that intellectual nature. And I think what it's saying here is, like you said, sometimes, and I've been around a lot of PhDs, and sometimes they're so book smart, and yet they're not people smart or street smart. And sometimes in order to be that kind of people smart and street smart, you kind of have to let go of that book smart. So to me, I'm saying that it's maybe just not written very well, but like the woman who is not as good as, or just not concentrating on that, or letting go of that intellectual learning, okay, then basically they're able to, that natural understanding, that natural learning that they have, can then, flourish. And that's how I'm reading it. So I'm not reading it sexist at all.
I love the way you're reading it.
We also have the ability to intellectually, intensively learn. But if we let that go, okay, then this extra understanding God gives us can really come about. And that's how I view this text.
I love that. I love your interpretation. I do want to point out here, just in the simple meaning of what Rav Kook is saying here, is that it's because that the women aren't engaging in the intellectual learning that they have this ability, to this kind of sixth sense to be able to understand those around us. The way at least I'm reading this text here, and again, it's my read of the text, not necessarily the read of the text, is that really men are capable of this too. It's just the fact they spend so much time learning. I want to point out here and sort of flip this text around for 1 second. We see in this text that, Torah learning is put as the pinnacle of Jewish values, right? To learn Torah is the best thing you could possibly do. There's literally a Mishnah in Peah that says, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, right? Some of us read it in our Sidurs, right? That learning Torah is the most important thing over any action, loving kindness we can do. And Rav Kook is saying, it's because these women don't do this great thing that they have this extra sense. But I want to turn this teaching on its head, right? I think what we're saying here is that if we take this back to the Shunammite woman saw somebody that her husband didn't see. She saw someone who was suffering, who needed help, when her husband, who, according to this understanding at least, was learning Talmud or learning some intellectual thing and were doing the thing he was supposed to be doing, and so therefore didn't recognize who needed help. And I want to open this teaching up to say, the trait of the Shunammite woman is to see those on the boundaries, to see people who are hurting right now, who might not fit into the system that has been made, right? And I think one of the lessons we can learn from the Shunammite woman is that we don't need to be so strapped down to the basic ideals of our community so that we can't actually see outside of those things, so that we don't miss people who are out on the outsides of our community, who are sitting on the sidelines, people who are in need of help. we need people to be looking not just in the regular lanes, but on the off-beaten trails as well, so they can have that sixth sense, right? They can't be so busy in just the way that our community normally tends to see things, and to not see the people who are struggling, which the Shunammite woman sees the person that other people don't see and brings them up and ends up giving a home to Elisha, which I think is wonderful. So I think there's a real brainstorm that could be happening here of who needs to be seen, who's not being seen. You know, what's distracting us sort of from being able to, from seeing the people, seeing the things that we need to see and that we need to lift up. I think I see Jill raising her hand again. Yeah.
Yeah, just something else just came to mind. And, maybe it was because, women have the ability to give birth and then raise children and things like that. So, maybe God gave this. See, I think that God gave it to men as well. It's just that he gave a little extra bit to women. Why? Because they're going to be more busy with bearing children and raising children and things like that. And then they may not have as much time for intellectual learning, but everybody needs to have intelligence. So it's like he gave us that extra bit of having it naturally, just because he knew that women may not have that extra time to study as men. And in regards to the prayer that you spoke about, that men in the morning say, thank God that I'm not a woman. And again, I just think it's written very poorly, but I never took offense at it, because from what I understand is that Hashem made us women closer to God. When I go to an Orthodox shul and say, and I would see that, people are like, oh, look, the women are like up there, they're away from everything. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm higher than the men. Where I sit, I'm higher than the men. God put me closer to him, put me higher than them. So I don't see it. And I think that the men, why do men have or obligated for more mitzvot? It's because they need that in order to stay on the derech and to stay on the derech.
I wish what you were saying, I don't want to get necessarily into this because it's a longer discussion, but I will just say very quickly, because I want to just stay on topic here, and we only have a couple more minutes anyway. So unfortunately, your views I've never found them in the text. I've never found them in the Talmud. I've never found them in the Midrash. I've never found them in the Zohar before. I wish I could find those sources, but I just haven't. Those reasonings have only come about in the past 150 years. Since feminism has come up, and there needs to be a reason that's explained why. Now, there's a lot of reasons in the Torah and the Talmud and the Kabbalah that talk about why women aren't obligated to mitzvot, and they're not so pretty. And so I tend to look at the sources that the rabbis explain themselves. But I don't, again, different people think different things, just my opinion today. But everyone can think different things. Sue, is this on that question, or is this on another on the topic we're talking about?
This is on topic. Your question of what can we do to assist those who need help? I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be aware that there are so many groups within our society who need help from those who are able to give it. And I think it's incumbent upon us as Jews to be aware of that and to help whomever we can, whenever we can.
100%.
We are required by our Judaism to be good citizens.
Thank you, Sue. 100%. I couldn't agree with you more, obviously. But just realistically, us in our silos in our synagogue, a lot of times we get very obsessed. Us rabbis, we spend 4 months, planning our Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur sermons, and we You know, we're really busy planning on what's going on in Shavuot, what's going on and what's going to happen for Passover. You know, sometimes because we're thinking about so many of the things that we're supposed to be thinking about, us as a community, we're so busy preparing for Passover, cleaning our house and koshering, just like we're supposed to do, that we're not actually thinking of the things, the people who might be hurting them, people who might be suffering right now. And I think this is a nice little counter text here to the tradition. Remember, the tradition is always in polarity. It's always speaking with each other in different values. I just want to end just to heighten this a little bit, just to bring this out just a little bit more. This is our last text of the day, and we'll finish up. This is from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. This is a midrash from the 10th century, a little bit of a later midrash, but very beautiful. It's been translated into English, and it's rarely available. But this is just, again, another interpretation here for a little bit, and I think it really brings a little bit more about Elisha here. This is a different understanding of that Elisha actually did look different, but he looked different in an interesting way. So Rabbi Joshua ben Korach said, "Come and see, learn from Elisha, the son of Shaphat. For no woman was able to gaze at his face without dying. And he went from mount to mount and from cave to cave. And he went to Shunem, and a great woman received him with great honor. And the woman said to her husband, 'This man of God is holy. No woman is able to gaze at his face without dying. But let us make, I pray thee, a little chamber on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed and a table and a stool and a lampstand. And every time that he passes, he can turn thither into the chamber, as it said, and it fell on a day that he came thither, and he turned it into the chamber. And he called for the Shunammite, as it is said, and he said, call her. And when he called her, she stood at the door. Why did she stand at the door? Because she was unable to gaze at his face, so that she should not die. Okay? So I should have taken out this part. We don't need it. What this text is saying is actually, he did look different. He looked really scary, and he had like this glowing face like Moshe did. And that so much so that if you looked at that face, it would like scar you. It would like burn you like the sun, right? So what did people do? They ran away from him, right? They didn't want to help him because they thought by helping him, they would be hurt or that they might be put in danger. But the Shunammite woman walked up and said, I can still help you and I can protect myself. Just because I'm afraid for my own life doesn't mean that I still don't have the obligation to help you, right? And that's exactly what she does in this very beautiful way here. She steps up and says, I'm not going to exempt myself from helping somebody else. You know, we did this a lot during COVID, right? You know, I don't want to get COVID. I might get sick. I don't want to help somebody. That's not what happened. We have to just figure out a different way, right? I saw so many people in Middletown, where I'm from, go out and the food pantries couldn't open, the soup kitchens couldn't open because they're afraid of COVID. So what do? They started handing out food on the streets, right? The public schools weren't open so that the children couldn't eat lunch. So what did? The public school districts gave out food in parking lots, and there was long lines, people waiting for that. Again, we can find a way. If help needs to happen, if somebody needs it, we can never use our own fear as an excuse to not do that chesed, to not do that loving kindness. All right, everybody, any last comments on the beautiful Shunammite woman? Any last thoughts, comments, things you might bring home today? No? All right. Well, thank you so much.
What's the bottom line here? No.
Yeah, the bottom, very good question. So I just want to make sure that we all understand the bottom line. The bottom line is that we should all strive to be like the Shunammite woman. The bottom line is that we all need to strive to see the person who's othered. We can't be constricted by our own worldviews and our own realities to not see the person who's hurting. Our fear can't push us away from helping other people. And that sometimes the person being a little less connected to the thing that we're supposed to be doing all the time enables us to look outwards, and that we can learn from the role model of the Shunammite woman and hopefully do the same in our own Jewish communities. All right, so we'll end in a second. I just want to get to the two people whose hands are raised and we'll finish up. Jill, would you like to go first, and then we'll have Susie?
Yeah, so I just had a class last week, and the rabbi talked about kindness versus chesed, and I think this is a very good example. So he said that kindness refers to how we're supposed to treat a person like in front of us in need. So you see somebody in front of you and they're upset, and you ask them how they are. Like, that's kindness. And then like the chesed, he said, requires us to think about others beyond that immediate sphere. So now it's a week later, and you call that person and say, you know, how are things going? Are you still upset? You know, has things resolved? Is there anything that I could still do? So like what you were talking about, figuring out a way. But I think it's, when you talk about kindness, there's that kindness, like the obvious kindness, like you said, the person's right there in front of you and they're not well. But then what's not obvious is following up a week later. And like going that extra mile, like you said, the food pantries couldn't open and people couldn't come in, but then they went the extra mile and they figured, well, how do we get it out to the community?
Gorgeous. Oh, I love what you said. That's just beautiful. And the Shunammite woman demonstrated that in such a lovely way, right? She didn't just say once, she left it open. She said, anytime you come through, you can come in and use it. It was a long-term thing. Thank you for reminding us. That was beautiful. Sue, last comment?
Yes, I just want to thank my rabbi for your facilitating that kindness in our shul when you opened the synagogue basement to the warming station. So I applaud you for that one.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your support, Sue. I really appreciate it. It's my honor. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. I want to thank again the Jewish Federation of Orange County for putting on this wonderful event. Please come back next week and hear Rachel speak. And I also do want to acknowledge that Rachel helped me put this shiur together. I kind of came to her and I was like, these are some of the ideas I have. Help me. And Rachel just kind of put everything together and made it and really came up with some ideas for me. So she was really fantastic. And so she's great, and come back next time for more. So.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We enjoyed all of these lessons. And next week, Rachel will be speaking about Ruth, and I'm sure it'll be just as enthralling as this was. And thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
And
Sharon.
thank you, Sharon, for
Everybody.
hosting us so lovely.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Rabbi.
This was terrific.
Rabbi.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sharon. Two
Thank
in a
you.
row. Yesterday's book
That's
club
all.
and today's lecture. Boy,
I know.
roll.
And thanks to Zoom, we're able to do all of this. So they went the extra mile.
Thank you. I'm glad I could
Okay.
participate even though I'm a male.
Well, you aren't alone, Paul, so.
I know,
good.
there's three of us. Thanks. But I restrained myself.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.